I stepped off the helicopter onto the deep-water Titan, my boots hitting the metal deck with a solid thunk. The rotor wash whipped around me for another few seconds before the pilot lifted off, leaving me standing there with my duffel bag and the biggest view of nothing I'd ever seen. The Gulf of Mexico stretched out in every direction, just water and more water, blue-green and endless under the afternoon sun. I'd worked land rigs before, but this was different. Out here, there wasn't anywhere to go. You must be west. I turned around. A man in his 40s walked toward me, stocky build, graying hair under a white hard hat. His handshake was firm and quick. Wesley Pierce, platform supervisor. He looked me up and down. You ready to get to work? Yes, sir. Good. Leave the bag here for now. I'll show you around first. Wesley led me into the maze of machinery and equipment. The rig was bigger than I'd expected, a small city of steel and pipes rising up from the platform. Everything hummed with constant noise, generators, pumps, compressors, the smell of diesel fuel and salt air mixed together. This here's the drill floor, Wesley said, pointing to a massive structure in the center. That's where the real work happens. You'll be doing maintenance mostly, keeping all this equipment running. We walked past rows of pipes stacked 20 feet high. Workers in coveralls moved between them, checking gauges and tightening connections. Everyone looked busy and focused. Galleys over there, Wesley continued, pointing to a low building near the edge of the platform. Meals are at 6, 12, and 6. Don't be late or you'll go hungry. We kept walking. Wesley showed me the control room with its wall of monitors and blinking lights. Then the machine shop where spare parts lined metal shelves. The safety station with life jackets and emergency equipment. How many people work out here? I asked. 43, counting you. We run 3 shifts, so there's always someone awake. Wesley stopped at a railing and looked out at the water. Ocean doesn't sleep, so we don't either. The tour took about an hour. Wesley explained the basic safety protocols, where to go if alarms sounded, how to use the emergency equipment, which areas were off limits. Standard stuff, mostly. I'd heard similar talks on other rigs. Your bunkmate's Shane Bowers, Wesley said as we headed toward the living quarters. Been here longer than anyone. He'll get you settled. The living quarters sat in a 3-story building on the north side of the platform. Inside, narrow hallways led to small rooms. Wesley knocked on a door marked 23. Come in. Wesley opened the door. A man sat on one of 2 narrow beds reading a paperback book. He looked up when we entered. Shane, this is Mason West, your new roommate. Shane stood up and shook my hand. He was shorter than me, maybe 5'8", but built solid. Salt and pepper hair, dark eyes, deeply tanned skin. An anchor tattoo showed on his left forearm below his rolled-up sleeve. Welcome to the Titan, Shane said. His voice was slow and deliberate. I'll leave you 2 to get acquainted, Wesley said. West, report to the drill floor at 0600 tomorrow. Shane will show you where to get your gear. Wesley left, closing the door behind him. I looked around the small room. 2 beds, 2 lockers, 1 small window. Not much space, but I'd had worse. You can have that bed, Shane said, pointing to the one on the left. Locker's empty too. I dropped my duffel bag and started unpacking. Shane went back to his book, but I could tell he was watching me. How long you been out here? I asked. 20 years, give or take. That's a long time. It is. Shane closed his book and set it aside. Where'd you work before this? Couple different places. Last one was a land rig outside Midland. Shane nodded. This is different. Ocean changes things. I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but I kept unpacking. Work clothes, toiletries, a few personal items. Everything fit in the locker with room to spare. The afternoon passed quietly. Shane answered my questions about meal times and where to find things, but he didn't say much else. He seemed like the type who kept to himself. Around 5:30, Shane stood up and walked to his locker. He opened it and pulled out a folded piece of paper from the top shelf. Then he sat back down and looked at me. Mason, he said, I need to tell you something important. The way he said it made me stop what I was doing. His expression had changed, more serious now. This rig isn't like the others. I waited for him to continue. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. Shane held up the piece of paper. There are rules here. Rules you need to follow exactly, or you won't survive your first month. I stared at him. What kind of rules? The kind that keep you alive. Shane unfolded the paper. I'm going to go through each one. You need to listen carefully. This was getting weird, but Shane's expression was dead serious. No hint of a joke or hazing ritual. Okay, I said. Shane looked down at the paper. Rule 1. Never look at the water after sunset. I waited for him to explain, but he just moved on. Rule 2. Always carry a flashlight between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. Shane, what? Let me finish. His voice was firm. Rule 3. At 2:13 a.m. every night, the power goes out for exactly 90 seconds. During this time, you must remain completely still. Do not move. Do not speak. Do not make any sound. I felt like I was listening to someone describe a nightmare. That doesn't make any sense. Rule 4. If you see someone walking around at night who doesn't respond when you speak to them, ignore them completely. Do not follow them. Do not try to help them. Shane kept reading in the same calm, methodical voice. Rule 5. If you see black clouds forming during daylight hours, get inside immediately and stay there until they pass. Rule 6. If fog rolls in while you're outside, return to your cabin immediately. Do not go anywhere else. Rule 7. Never, under any circumstances, enter the ocean. Shane folded the paper back up and looked at me. Those are the rules. I didn't know what to say. The whole thing sounded insane. Shane, I don't understand. What's this really about? It's about staying alive. Shane's expression didn't change. I know how it sounds, but I've been here 20 years. I've seen good men disappear because they didn't follow these rules. Disappear how? Different ways. Some just vanish during their shift. Others... Shane paused. Others do things that don't make sense. Walk off the platform. Stop eating. Stop sleeping. I sat down on my bed. This was not what I'd expected. Look, Shane continued, I'm not asking you to understand it. I'm asking you to follow the rules, that's all. And if I don't? Shane met my eyes. Then you'll be gone within a month. Maybe sooner. The room went quiet. Outside, I could hear the constant noise of the rig operations. Normal sounds. But sitting here listening to Shane's rules, everything felt different. How many people know about this? I asked. Everyone who's been here more than a few months. The ones who survive, anyway. And Wesley? The supervisor? Wesley knows, but he won't talk about it. None of the management will. I looked at the folded paper in Shane's hand. Can I see that? Shane handed it over. The paper was worn soft from handling. Someone had written the rules in careful block letters. At the bottom, in different handwriting, were initials and dates, lots of them. What are these? I asked, pointing to the initials. Everyone who's followed the rules and made it past their first month signs it, like a contract. I counted the initials. There were maybe 30 of them, spanning what looked like several years. And the people who don't make it? They don't sign. I stared at the paper. This was crazy, but Shane's expression hadn't changed. He was completely serious. I know it's a lot, Shane said, but you'll understand once you've been here a while. The ocean does things to people, changes them. The rules are the only thing that keeps us human. I folded the paper and handed it back to him. This is insane. Maybe, but it's also true. Shane took the paper and held it out to me again. Keep it. Read it every day until you memorize it. Your life depends on it. I took the paper back. The weight of it felt heavier than it should have. I set the paper on my nightstand and stretched out on the narrow mattress. The sheets smelled like industrial detergent. Shane had already turned off the overhead light, leaving just the small reading lamp by his bed. "Get some sleep," he said without looking up from his book. "6 comes early out here." I closed my eyes and tried to settle in. The rig never stopped making noise. Pumps hummed somewhere below us. Metal creaked and groaned as the platform swayed with the waves. Generators rumbled in the distance. After living in town for the past few years, all the mechanical sounds felt overwhelming, but I was tired enough that I started drifting off anyway. Then everything went black. The darkness hit like someone had thrown a switch, not just the lights in our room, but everything. The constant electrical hum that had been running in the background since I'd arrived suddenly cut out. Even the red emergency lights went dark. I'd never experienced silence like that, complete and absolute. The only sound was my own breathing. My hand shot out toward the nightstand, fumbling for the flashlight I'd set there. Shane had said to always carry one between midnight and 6, and I'd figured I should start following that rule right away. But then I remembered the third rule: stay completely still during the power outage at 2:13. I froze with my fingers just touching the flashlight. Was this it? I didn't know what time it was, but the timing felt right. Shane had said it happened every night at exactly 2:13 and lasted 90 seconds. So I didn't move, didn't turn on the flashlight, just lay there in the darkness, trying to control my breathing. That's when I heard the whispers. They started faint, like voices carrying from far away. I couldn't make out words at first, just the soft sound of people talking somewhere in the distance. The voices seemed to come from the hallway outside our room. I held my breath and listened. The whispers grew clearer as they moved closer. Multiple voices, maybe 3 or 4 people having a conversation. But the words didn't make sense. They weren't speaking English or any language I recognized. The sounds were too sharp, too guttural, like someone trying to speak with their mouth full of gravel. The voices drifted down the corridor toward our door. I could hear footsteps now too, slow and deliberate. More than one person walking in perfect rhythm. My heart started pounding so hard, I was sure whoever was out there would hear it. The whispers got louder as they approached. The strange words echoed off the metal walls, creating an eerie chorus that seemed to come from every direction at once. I wanted to reach for Shane to see if he was awake, but I didn't dare move. The rule had been specific: stay completely still. Don't do anything for 90 seconds. The footsteps stopped right outside our door. The whispers continued, but now they sounded like they were having a conversation about something urgent. The tone was almost argumentative, with voices cutting each other off and overlapping. One voice would hiss something in that strange language, then another would respond with what sounded like disagreement. I squeezed my eyes shut, even though it made no difference in the complete darkness. The voices were so close now that they seemed to be coming from inside our room. Then I felt something brush against my arm. I nearly jumped out of the bed, but somehow managed to stay still. It felt like fingers trailing across my skin, light as feathers but definitely there. Cold fingers that didn't belong to anyone human. The whispers grew more intense. Whatever they were discussing, they seemed to be reaching some kind of conclusion. The voices started speaking in unison, chanting the same incomprehensible words over and over. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the lights flickered back on. The whispers vanished instantly. The footsteps stopped. The room was empty except for Shane and me. I sat up, gasping. My shirt was soaked with sweat. Shane was lying in his bed, perfectly still, staring at the ceiling. "Shane?" I whispered. He turned his head toward me. "You okay? Did you hear that? The voices?" "Yeah." He sat up and checked his watch. 2:15, right on schedule. What the hell was that? Shane swung his legs over the side of his bed. "That's why you don't move during the outage. They're looking for people who aren't supposed to be here." "They?" "I don't know what they are. Been happening every night for as long as I've been on this rig." Best guess is they're checking to make sure everyone belongs. I wiped the sweat from my forehead. And if you move? People who move during the outage tend to disappear. Sometimes we find them wandering around the next day, but they're different, empty, like someone scooped out everything that made them who they were. I looked at the door. It felt like they were right here in the room. They probably were. The walls don't seem to matter much to them. Shane stood up and stretched. You did good, though. Staying still isn't easy the first time. How do you get used to something like that? You don't. You just learn to live with it. He walked to his locker and pulled out a water bottle. Want some advice? Sure. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to figure out what they are or where they come from. Just follow the rules and do your job. That's how you survive out here. I nodded, but my hands were still shaking. Does it happen the same way every night? Pretty much, 2:13 to 2:15, like clockwork. Sometimes the voices are louder, sometimes quieter, but they always come. Shane finished his water and got back into bed. Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. I lay back down, but sleep didn't come easy. Every little sound made me tense up. When I finally did drift off, I kept waking up at random intervals, convinced I heard whispers in the walls. The next 3 days passed in a blur of work and exhaustion. Wesley had me helping with routine maintenance around the platform, checking valve pressure, replacing worn gaskets, cleaning equipment, basic stuff that didn't require much experience. The crew was friendly enough, but nobody talked about the rules Shane had shown me. It was like there was an unspoken agreement to pretend everything was normal during daylight hours. I met Leo Collins and Braden Maldonado, 2 guys around my age who'd been on the rig for about 6 months. They showed me the ropes and answered questions about the work, but whenever I tried to bring up anything unusual about the platform, they'd change the subject. Jose York was different. He was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and deep-set eyes that seemed to see everything. He'd been working offshore for 15 years, the last 2 on the Titan. During a break on my 3rd day, he pulled me aside. Shane gave you the talk yet? He asked. About the rules? Yeah. Jose nodded. Good. Some of the new guys don't take it seriously at first. That's usually when we lose them. How many people have you lost? Since I've been here? 4, maybe 5. He took a sip of coffee from a thermos. Could have been more if they hadn't listened to the warnings. What happened to them? Different things. One guy decided the rules were nonsense and went for a swim during his 2nd week. Never came back up. Another one kept a light on during the power outage. Found him the next morning, standing on the edge of the platform, staring at the water. Took 3 of us to pull him back, and he fought us the whole time. Jose screwed the cap back on his thermos. Point is, the rules aren't suggestions. They're the difference between going home after your rotation and becoming fish food. That evening, I was working near the drill floor when the sun started setting. The sky turned orange and red, reflecting off the water in long streaks. It was actually beautiful, and I found myself watching as the sun got lower. Most of the crew had already headed inside for dinner, but I wanted to finish checking the equipment I'd been assigned. The work was straightforward, just visual inspections and noting anything that looked worn or damaged. The sun touched the horizon, turning the entire western sky into a canvas of deep orange and purple. I'd always enjoyed sunsets back on land, and this one was spectacular. The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, and for a moment I could understand why people chose to work out here despite the isolation. Then the sun disappeared completely below the horizon. The sky darkened quickly, the way it does over open water. Stars started appearing overhead. The platform's lights came on automatically, casting everything in harsh white illumination. I should have gone inside then. Shane's first rule was clear: never look at the water after sunset. But I was almost finished with my work, and I figured a quick glance wouldn't hurt. I walked to the edge of the platform and looked down at the dark water. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just black waves reflecting the rig's lights. The water looked deep and empty, exactly what you'd expect in the middle of the Gulf. But then something moved beneath the surface. It was big, much bigger than any fish or dolphin. A dark shape gliding through the water about 20 feet down, serpentine and fluid. As I watched, more shapes appeared. They moved in patterns that seemed almost coordinated, like they were swimming in formation. One of them rose closer to the surface, and I caught a better look at it. The thing was easily 40 feet long, with a body that undulated like a massive snake, but it had features that didn't belong on any sea creature I'd ever heard of. Ridged spines along its back, what looked like arms or appendages along its sides, and a head that was too large and too angular to be natural. More of them surfaced. I counted at least 6, maybe more. They moved through the water with purpose, circling the platform like they were patrolling the area. My hands started trembling. These things shouldn't exist. Nothing like them lived in the Gulf of Mexico. Hell, nothing like them lived anywhere on Earth. One of the creatures turned and looked directly up at me. Its eyes were huge and luminescent, glowing with a pale green light that cut through the dark water. The head was vaguely reptilian but wrong in ways I couldn't put into words. Too many angles, too many teeth visible even with its mouth closed. It held my gaze for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then it opened its mouth and let out a sound that carried through the water and up to the platform. Not quite a roar, not quite a scream. Something that made my bones ache just hearing it. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a piece of equipment. The creature's eyes tracked my movement, and I realized it was studying me the same way I'd been studying it. That's when I remembered Shane's warning and quickly turned away from the water. I settled into the routine faster than I expected. The work wasn't complicated. Checking pressure gauges, replacing worn parts, cleaning equipment that got clogged with salt spray. Wesley kept me busy during the day, and the nights followed the same pattern. Lights out, whispers at 2:13, back to sleep. Shane didn't talk much about the rules after that first night. He'd nod when I got back to the room before sunset, check that I had my flashlight before bed, but he didn't lecture me or ask questions. I figured he'd said what needed saying. The other crew members acted normal during the day. Leo Collins worked the morning shift with me sometimes. Quiet guy with blonde hair and a soft accent I couldn't place. Braden Maldonado ran equipment checks on the drill floor. Jose York handled supply inventory and told stories about jobs he'd worked before this one. Nobody mentioned the rules during daylight hours. They talked about weather, complained about the food, discussed maintenance schedules, regular stuff. But I noticed things. How everyone made sure they were inside before sunset. How nobody worked alone after midnight. How conversations stopped when the lights flickered. By the end of my first week, I thought I had it figured out. Follow the rules, do the work, survive the rotation. Simple enough. That's when I met my first sleepwalker. I'd been checking a pump on the lower deck that kept making grinding noises. Nothing serious, just needed the housing cleaned and the bearings greased. But it took longer than expected, and by the time I finished it was almost 11:30. I packed up my tools and headed back to the living quarters. The corridors were dimly lit after 10 p.m., just enough light to see where you were going. My footsteps echoed off the metal walls as I walked toward the north building. I was maybe 50 feet from my room when I heard other footsteps. Slow, measured steps coming from the direction I was heading. I stopped walking and listened. The steps continued at the same pace. Not hurried, not hesitant, just steady movement down the hallway. I remembered Shane's fourth rule. If you encounter people walking at night who don't respond to you, ignore them completely. I pressed myself against the wall and waited. The footsteps got closer and I could see a figure approaching from around the corner ahead. It was Leo Collins, still wearing his work coveralls and safety boots. but something was wrong with the way he moved. Leo walked like he was following an invisible line down the center of the corridor. His steps were perfectly spaced, each foot landing exactly the same distance apart. His arms hung at his sides without swinging. His head stayed level, eyes focused straight ahead. I'd worked with Leo for a week. He had a relaxed way of moving, kind of loose and easy. This wasn't how Leo walked. As he got closer, I could see his face in the corridor lighting. His eyes were open, but they looked past everything, like he was staring at something far away. His expression was completely blank. No awareness, no recognition, nothing. Leo passed within 3 feet of me. I held my breath and stayed perfectly still against the wall. His eyes never shifted in my direction. He didn't slow down or speed up, just kept walking at that same mechanical pace. I watched him continue down the corridor until he turned the corner and disappeared. His footsteps faded gradually, still maintaining that exact rhythm. I waited another 2 minutes before I moved. When I was sure he was gone, I walked quickly to my room and slipped inside. Shane was reading in bed, same as always. He looked up when I came in. "You're cutting it close," he said. "Had to finish a pump repair. Took longer than expected." Shane nodded and went back to his book. He didn't ask why I looked shaken or if anything had happened. Maybe he already knew. I got ready for bed and lay down, but it took a long time to fall asleep. I kept thinking about Leo's empty expression and those perfectly measured steps. During the day, Leo was a normal guy who talked about fishing and complained about the coffee. Whatever I'd seen in the hallway wasn't Leo. Not really. The next morning, Leo showed up for his shift like nothing had happened. He worked on valve maintenance and made jokes with Braden about the breakfast eggs being too rubbery. When I looked at his face, his eyes were alert and focused, completely different from the night before. I didn't mention what I'd seen, neither did he. The second week brought different challenges. I was getting better at the work, moving faster through my daily tasks. Wesley started giving me more complicated repairs and letting me work with less supervision. The routine felt normal, or as normal as anything could feel on a platform surrounded by supernatural ocean creatures. Wednesday afternoon, I was replacing corroded bolts on the equipment housing when Jose found me. "Storm coming," he said. "Wesley wants all outside work finished by 4. I looked at the sky. It was overcast, but not particularly threatening. Gray clouds, light wind, typical Gulf weather. "Doesn't look too bad," I said. Jose followed my gaze and frowned. "Not that kind of storm." He walked away without explaining what he meant. I finished the bolt replacement and moved on to the next task on my list, checking the tension on some support cables near the platform edge. Around 3:45, I noticed the clouds changing. The gray overcast was breaking up, but instead of clearing, it was being replaced by something else. Dark patches appeared in the northern sky, spreading outward like ink in water. But these weren't normal storm clouds. They were perfectly black, not dark gray or deep purple like thunderheads. Pure black, so dark they seemed to absorb the light around them. And they moved wrong, pushing against the wind instead of with it. I stopped working and stared at the approaching cloud formation. It stretched across the horizon in a solid line, maybe 20 miles wide. The edges were sharp and defined like someone had drawn a boundary between normal sky and complete darkness. Shane's 5th rule came back to me. If black clouds form during daylight hours, get inside immediately. Don't wait to see what happens. I dropped my tools and ran for the nearest entrance. Behind me, the temperature was dropping fast. I could feel cold air pushing across the platform as the darkness got closer. Other crew members were heading inside too. I saw Braden jogging toward the living quarters and Leo moving quickly across the drill floor. Nobody was panicking, but everyone was moving with purpose. I reached the entrance to the main building just as the first edge of darkness passed overhead. The change was immediate and complete. 1 second I could see the door handle clearly, the next second everything went black. Not dim, not shadowy. Black like being inside a sealed room with no windows. I fumbled for the door and managed to get inside. The building's interior lights were still working, but when I looked out the windows I couldn't see anything. The darkness was so thick it was like looking at a solid wall. Other crew members were gathered in the common area, waiting. Nobody seemed particularly worried, just resigned to sitting it out. "How long does this usually last?" I asked Jose. "Hour, maybe 2, depends." "On what?" Jose shrugged. "Never figured that out." I found a chair near one of the windows and watched the darkness outside. It wasn't moving or shifting, just complete absence of light pressing against the glass. I tried to make out shapes or movement, but there was nothing to see. After about 20 minutes, I started to understand why Shane had said running was useless once the clouds were overhead. The darkness was so complete that you wouldn't be able to see your own hands, let alone find your way to safety. Anyone caught outside when it hit would be completely lost. The crew members talked quietly among themselves, discussing normal things like shift schedules and equipment maintenance. Like sitting in supernatural darkness was just another part of the job. Around 5 o'clock, the darkness started to lift. It didn't fade gradually. It pulled back in the same sharp line it had arrived with. Within minutes, normal daylight returned to the platform. I looked out the window and everything appeared exactly as it had before. Same gray overcast, same equipment on deck, same ocean stretching to the horizon, like the darkness had never been there at all. The crew members got up and went back to their work without discussion. I followed them outside and retrieved my tools. The air temperature was back to normal, and there was no sign that anything unusual had happened. But I couldn't shake the memory of that perfect blackness. It hadn't been a natural weather phenomenon. Storm clouds blocked light, but this had been something that devoured it completely. That evening, I sat on my bunk and read through Shane's rules again. I'd been thinking of them as warnings about weird things that might happen. Now I understood they were survival instructions for things that definitely would happen. The ocean had creatures that patrolled around the platform. Unknown entities walked the corridors at night, checking for people who didn't belong. Darkness could swallow the rig completely during daylight hours. Shane had been right. The rules weren't superstitions. They were the only things keeping us alive out here. My third week on the platform started like the others. Same routine, same faces, same careful attention to sunset timing. I'd gotten used to the rhythm of it all. Check equipment, finish repairs, get inside before dark. The rules had become second nature. Braden was different that week though, more restless than usual. He'd always been the type to push boundaries, make jokes about the safety protocols, but something had shifted. Maybe it was the isolation getting to him. Maybe it was the way Leo had been sleepwalking more often, or how we'd had 3 power outages in 5 nights instead of just 1. Tuesday afternoon, I was working on a valve assembly near the drill floor when Braden showed up. He had that look in his eyes, the one that meant trouble. "You ever wonder what's really down there?" he asked, leaning against the railing. I kept my focus on the wrench. "Nope." "Come on, Mason, you've seen them too. Those things swimming around at night." I had seen them, more than once since that first time, but I'd learned not to look. "Doesn't matter what I've seen." "Bullshit, it doesn't matter." Braden kicked at a loose bolt on the deck. "We're sitting on top of the ocean and we're not even allowed to look at it after dark. That's insane." "The rules work," I said. "People who follow them stay alive." "Yeah, well, maybe the rules are just keeping us scared. Maybe there's nothing down there but regular fish and our own paranoia." I looked up at him then. Big mistake. I could see he'd already made up his mind about something. That stubborn set to his jaw, the way his hands kept moving, tapping against his legs. He was working himself up to something stupid. "Don't," I said. "Don't what?" "Whatever you're thinking about doing. Don't." Braden laughed, but it didn't sound right. "You don't even know what I'm thinking." "I know you well enough, and I know those rules aren't suggestions." He walked away without another word, but I could feel it in the air between us. He was going to test something. The question was, what? I found out Friday evening. I'd finished my shift early and was heading back to my room when I heard voices from the rec area. Loud voices. Braden's voice, specifically. And he sounded like he'd been drinking. The rec area was just a corner of the main building with a few chairs, a table, and some beat-up magazines. Nothing fancy, but it's where guys went to kill time between shifts. When I walked in, Braden was there with Leo and 2 other crew members I didn't know well. Empty beer cans sat on the table. "Mason," Braden called out when he saw me. "Perfect timing. We were just talking about those famous rules of yours." "They're not my rules." Right. Shane's rules. The holy scripture of platform survival." Braden took another swig from his beer. "Tell me something, Mason. Have you ever actually seen anyone break one of these rules?" I thought about the sleepwalkers, about Leo walking past me in that mechanical way. "Yeah, I have. And what happened to them?" "Nothing good. But they're still here, right? Leo's still here. The other guys who walk around at night, they're still working their shifts." Leo shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Braden, maybe we should what? Should keep pretending that we're not grown men who can make our own decisions? Should keep acting like we're trapped in some horror movie?" I sat down across from him. "What are you getting at?" Braden leaned forward. His eyes were bloodshot but focused. "I'm getting at the fact that maybe it's time someone actually tested these rules. Maybe it's time we found out what's real and what's just stories people tell to keep each other in line." "That's a bad idea." "Is it? Or is it the first good idea anyone's had out here in 20 years? Leo stood up. "I'm going to head back to my room." "Sit down, Leo." "Braden, sit down." There was something in Braden's voice that made Leo pause. Not anger exactly, more like desperation. "I'm tired of being afraid of shadows. I'm tired of tiptoeing around like we're in some kind of prison. The rules keep us safe," I said. "Do they? Or do they just keep us scared?" Braden finished his beer and set the can down hard. "You know what I think? I think someone made up these rules to control us, to keep us from asking questions about what's really going on out here. Then explain the power outages, explain the sleepwalkers. I can't explain them, but that doesn't mean I have to be afraid of them." The conversation went on for another hour, Braden getting more worked up, the rest of us trying to talk him down. But I could see it wasn't working. He'd convinced himself that the rules were some kind of conspiracy, that the only way to prove they were wrong was to break one. The next day was Saturday. My shift ended at 4, and I was looking forward to some downtime. The weather was clear, calm seas, normal gray sky. Good conditions for getting work done without worrying about black clouds or sudden fog. I was in my room, reading one of Shane's paperbacks when I heard commotion outside. Voices calling, footsteps running across the deck. I grabbed my jacket and went to see what was happening. A crowd had gathered near the platform's edge. Wesley was there, along with Jose and several other crew members. They were all looking down at the water, and the expressions on their faces told me everything I needed to know. "What happened?" I asked Jose. "Braden," he said. "He jumped." My stomach dropped. "Jumped? About 10 minutes ago. Just walked out here, stripped down to his underwear, and dove right off the platform." I pushed through the crowd to get to the railing. The water was about 60 feet down, dark blue-green in the afternoon light. I could see ripples where something had disturbed the surface, but no sign of Braden. "Anyone see him come up?" Wesley asked. "He came up once," said one of the crew members, "right after he hit the water, but then what?" "Then something grabbed him." Wesley turned to face the man. "What do you mean, something grabbed him?" "I mean something pulled him under, something big." We all stood there staring at the water, waiting, hoping maybe Braden would surface again, that maybe he was just a strong swimmer who could hold his breath longer than most people. Then we heard the screaming. It came from somewhere beneath the surface, muffled by the water but unmistakably human. unmistakably Braden, the sound of someone in absolute terror. "Jesus Christ," Wesley muttered. The screaming stopped for a moment. Then Braden's head broke the surface about 50 feet from the platform. He was thrashing, trying to swim, his mouth open as he gasped for air. "Help!" he shouted. "Help me!" Wesley was already moving, heading for the emergency equipment. But before he could reach it, something yanked Braden back under. The water churned where he'd been, dark shapes moving just beneath the surface. The screaming started again, underwater, but we could still hear it. A sound I'll never forget as long as I live. "We have to do something," Leo said. "Like what?" Jose grabbed his arm. "You want to jump in there too?" Braden surfaced again, further from the platform this time. He was barely keeping his head above water, his movements weaker than before. Whatever had him wasn't letting go. It was playing with him. "The boat," Wesley said. "We can take the emergency boat." But even as he said it, we all knew it was too late. Braden went under again, and this time the screaming was different. Higher pitched, more desperate. The sound of someone who knew they were going to die. It went on for 10 minutes. 10 minutes of Braden being pulled under and brought back up. 10 minutes of screaming that got weaker each time. 10 minutes of watching something in the water toy with a human being like a cat with a mouse. Then it stopped. The water went calm. No more thrashing, no more screaming. Just normal ocean waves lapping against the platform supports. We waited another hour, scanning the surface, hoping maybe Braden had somehow gotten away. But deep down, we all knew better. Whatever was down there had finished with him. Wesley called it in as an accidental drowning, man overboard, search and rescue, all the official procedures, but no body was ever recovered. And everyone who'd been on that platform, everyone who'd heard those screams knew exactly what had happened. Braden had tested the 7th rule, and the ocean had won. The incident report was filed within 24 hours. Accidental drowning due to unsafe behavior during off-duty hours. No mention of the screaming. No mention of the shapes in the water. Just another unfortunate accident on an offshore oil platform. But the crew knew better, and for the next few days, nobody talked much during meals. Nobody made jokes about the safety protocols, and absolutely nobody went anywhere near the platform's edge after sunset. Shane came back from shore leave on Tuesday. He took one look at my face and knew something had happened. "Who was it?" he asked. "Braden." Shane nodded slowly. "Which rule?" "The ocean." "Ah." Shane sat down on his bunk and pulled off his boots. "I figured it might be him. He had that look about him last time I saw him, like he was working himself up to something stupid. He thought the rules were fake, thought someone made them up to control us. Yeah, well, now he knows better." Shane's matter-of-fact tone bothered me. "That's it? That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say, Mason? That I'm sorry? That I wish it hadn't happened?" Shane looked at me with those dark eyes. "I am sorry, but I'm not surprised. This place has a way of sorting people out, the ones who listen and the ones who don't. He was 29 years old, and he made a choice, a stupid choice, but his choice." Shane lay back on his bunk. "The rules aren't suggestions, Mason. They're not guidelines or recommendations. They're the difference between going home at the end of your contract and becoming fish food." I wanted to argue with him, wanted to say that Braden deserved better than that cold dismissal, but I couldn't, because Shane was right. Braden had known the rules. We'd all told him what would happen, and he'd chosen to ignore the warnings. The ocean didn't care about his reasons. It didn't care that he was young or drunk or frustrated with the isolation. It just cared that he'd broken the rule, and it had collected its payment. The rest of that week passed quietly, too quietly. The crew went about their work with a kind of grim efficiency, like they were all waiting for the other shoe to drop. And maybe they were, because if there's one thing I'd learned about the platform, it's that trouble comes in waves. My 4th week started with fog. I woke up Thursday morning to find the world outside our window completely white. Not gray, not misty, white. Thick, impenetrable fog that made it impossible to see more than a few feet in any direction. "Shit," Shane said when he looked out the window. "Bad?" "Very bad." He was already getting dressed, moving faster than usual. This is the kind of fog that doesn't lift for hours, sometimes days. "What's the big deal? It's just fog." Shane stopped putting on his shirt and looked at me. "Read the rules again, Mason. Read them carefully." I pulled out the paper and scanned down to the 6th rule. Return to your cabin immediately if fog rolls in while you're outside. Never leave your cabin until the fog lifts completely. "Never leave your cabin," I read aloud. "That's right. No matter what you hear, no matter who calls your name, no matter what seems to be happening outside that door, you stay put." Why? What happens in the fog? Things that aren't real, things that sound real, look real, but aren't. Shane finished getting dressed and sat down on his bunk. The fog brings visitors, and they're very good at pretending to be people you know. I looked out the window again. The fog was so thick I couldn't even see the outline of the next building. It was like being wrapped in cotton. How long does it usually last? Hard to say, sometimes a few hours, sometimes longer. Shane pulled out a deck of cards. "Hope you're not claustrophobic." The first few hours weren't bad. We played cards, talked about home, shared stories about previous jobs. The fog outside didn't seem to be moving at all, just sitting there, thick and white and completely still. Around noon, we heard the first voice. "Mason?" It came from somewhere in the hallway, distant but clear. "Mason, you in there?" Shane and I both froze. The voice sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. "Mason?" The voice came again, closer this time. "It's Wesley. I need to talk to you." I started to get up, but Shane grabbed my arm. "No. It's Wesley." "No, it's not. It sounds like Wesley. It sounds like a lot of things. That's the point." Shane's grip on my arm tightened. "Remember the rule, Mason. No matter what you hear." The voice in the hallway continued calling my name. Sometimes it sounded like Wesley. Sometimes it sounded like Jose. Once it sounded like Leo, asking if I was okay, saying he was worried about me. But Shane was right. It wasn't any of them. Because I could hear the difference now. The voices were too perfect. Too exactly like the people they claimed to be. Real people have variations in their speech, little imperfections. These voices sounded like recordings. The knocking started around 2 o'clock. "Mason? Knock, knock, knock." "Mason, open up. It's me." This time the voice was different, softer, female, and my blood went cold because I recognized it immediately. "Mason, please, I need to talk to you." It was my sister Sarah's voice. Sarah, who lived 1,500 miles away in Ohio. Sarah, who had never set foot on an oil platform in her life. "Oh God," I whispered. Shane was watching me carefully. "Who is it?" "My sister." "It's not your sister." "Mason?" The voice came again, pleading now. "I know you're in there. Please, I'm scared. Something's wrong out here." I stood up and walked toward the door. I couldn't help myself. That was Sarah's voice. Sarah's inflection, Sarah's way of saying my name when she was upset. "Mason, don't. She sounds hurt. She's not real. Please." The voice outside continued. "I don't know how I got here. I don't know where I am. Everything's white and I can't see anything, and I'm so scared." My hand was on the door handle. I knew I shouldn't open it. I knew Shane was right. But that voice, God, it sounded so much like Sarah. "Mason." Shane was right behind me now. "Think about it. How would your sister get here? How would she get past security, past the helicopter pad, past Wesley? How would she even know which room was yours?" He was right. Of course he was right. But the voice outside was so convincing. "I'm lost," it said. "I'm so lost and scared, and I just want to go home." Tears were running down my face. because it wasn't just Sarah's voice. It was Sarah's fear, Sarah's confusion, Sarah's way of crying when she was overwhelmed. Whatever was outside that door had somehow captured every detail of my sister's speech patterns. "It's not her," Shane said gently. "I know it sounds like her, but it's not." The voice changed then, became angry. "Mason, open this door right now. I'm your sister, and I'm telling you to open this door." That was Sarah, too. Sarah when she was frustrated with me, when she thought I was being stubborn. The voice had even captured her Ohio accent, the way she pronounced certain words. "Fine," the voice said after a moment. "Be that way, but don't come crying to me when you need help." The footsteps moved away from our door, but a few minutes later, I heard the voice again, further down the hallway. "Leo, Leo, it's Mason. I need your help." Now it was my voice calling for Leo, my accent, my inflection, my way of saying Leo's name. And I realized that whatever was in that hallway was working its way through the entire building, trying each door, using the voice of whoever might get that particular person to open up. The voices continued all day. Sometimes they were crew members. Sometimes they were family members from home. Once, I heard what sounded like my father, asking me to help him fix something. Another time, it was my old supervisor from my previous job telling me I needed to come in for an emergency repair. Each voice was perfect. Each one captured exactly the right tone, the right speech patterns, the right emotional triggers. Whatever was creating these voices had access to my memories, my relationships, my deepest connections to other people, and it was using them against me. Shane and I sat in that room for 18 hours of voices calling our names, pleading with us, demanding that we open the door. 18 hours of fighting the urge to help people who sounded like they needed us. The worst part was around midnight when I heard Sarah's voice again. But this time she wasn't asking for help. She was crying. Soft, heartbroken sobbing that went on for nearly an hour. "I know you can hear me," she whispered through her tears. "I know you're in there. Why won't you help me? Why won't you talk to me? I'm your sister, Mason. I'm your sister, and I'm hurt, and you won't even open the door." I pressed my hands over my ears, but I could still hear her. Still hear that perfect recreation of Sarah's voice, Sarah's pain, Sarah's confusion about why her brother wouldn't help her. Shane sat next to me on my bunk and didn't say anything. Just sat there while I fought against every instinct I had, every protective feeling I'd ever had for my sister. When morning came, the fog finally began to lift. The fog lifted sometime after dawn, and I could finally hear Shane moving around the room again. He didn't mention what had happened, neither did I, but something had changed. The voice had been too perfect, too much like Sarah, and the way it had shifted from pleading to angry to manipulative, that wasn't random. Whatever was out there in the fog had been studying me, learning how to get under my skin. Over the next few weeks, I found myself paying closer attention to everything. The way Leo's eyes went completely blank when he sleepwalked. How the black clouds always moved against the wind. The exact timing of the power outages, always 2:13, always 90 seconds, never a second more or less. Shane noticed me watching. "You're starting to see the patterns," he said one evening as we sat in the rec room after dinner. "Yeah," I said. "It's not random, is it? Any of it." "Nothing here is random." Shane folded his cards and set them on the table. "That's what makes the rules work. Once you understand that everything follows a schedule, everything has a purpose, you can navigate around it." "What kind of purpose?" Shane looked around the empty rec room, then leaned forward. "Jose might have some answers for you. He's been here longer than anyone except me, and he asks the same questions you're asking." I found Jose the next day during lunch break. He was sitting alone at a corner table, picking at his sandwich and staring out the window at the calm blue water. "Mind if I sit?" I asked. He gestured to the chair across from him. "You've been here, 2 months now?" "About that. And you're starting to wonder what we're really dealing with out here." It wasn't a question. I nodded. Jose pushed his plate away and leaned back in his chair. I've been on Deepwater Titan for 5 years. Before that, I worked 3 other rigs in the Gulf. Never saw anything like this on any of them. So it's specific to this location? Has to be. Jose glanced around, making sure we were alone. You know what this rig is sitting on top of? Oil deposits? Oil, yeah, but that's not all. Jose's voice dropped lower. When they first started drilling here, they hit something they weren't expecting, something that wasn't on any geological survey. I waited for him to continue. The official reports say they encountered an unusual rock formation at about 8,000 feet, required special drilling techniques to get through, but I've talked to guys who were on the original crew and they tell a different story. What kind of story? Jose was quiet for a long moment. They say when the drill bit broke through, the whole platform shook, not from equipment failure, from something moving down there, and the water around the rig changed color for 3 days. Turned this dark green, almost black. Changed how? Nobody knows. Company brought in environmental specialists, took water samples, ran tests. Everything came back normal. But the crew who was here during those 3 days, half of them requested immediate transfer. The other half started talking about hearing things at night, seeing shapes in the water. I thought about the serpentine creatures I'd seen that first week. The things in the ocean, you think they came from whatever's down there? I think we woke something up, Jose said, and now we're living with the consequences. Over the following weeks, I watched the crew more carefully. New guys would arrive by helicopter, get the same tour from Wesley, get assigned rooms and shifts. Some adapted quickly, following the unspoken protocols and staying inside after dark. Others lasted only a few days before finding excuses to leave, but some broke the rules. I watched a mechanic named Torres ignore the black cloud warning during his second week. He was working on a pump housing when the darkness rolled in, and instead of dropping his tools and running for cover, he kept working. Said he wasn't going to let some weather scare him. When the absolute darkness passed over the platform, Torres was still outside. We found him 3 hours later when the clouds moved on. He was standing on the drill floor, perfectly still, staring up at the sky. His eyes were open but completely unfocused. When Wesley called his name, Torres didn't respond. When Wesley touched his shoulder, Torres turned his head with mechanical precision and looked right through him. Torres worked his remaining shifts like that, functional but empty. He followed instructions, completed tasks, ate meals on schedule, but he never spoke unless directly asked a question, and his answers were always single words or short phrases. No personality, no humor, no recognition of people he'd been joking with just days before. Torres requested transfer after 2 weeks. Wesley approved it immediately. I started keeping track after that. New crew members who ignored the rules or tried to test them. Most disappeared entirely. Their beds found empty in the morning, personal belongings still in their lockers, no sign of where they'd gone. A few ended up like Torres, physically present, but fundamentally changed. "How many have you seen come and go?" I asked Shane one evening. "In 20 years? Hard to say exactly. Maybe 200 new crew members. About half make it past the first month. Of those, maybe half make it past 6 months. What happens to the ones who make it? They become like us. They learn to live with it. During my 4th month, I met a guy named Richards who'd been on the platform for 8 months. He had the same careful way of moving that Shane and Jose had, the same habit of checking the time before going anywhere, the same quick glance at the sky whenever he stepped outside. "You get used to it," Richards told me during a break. "The rules become automatic. You don't even think about them anymore." "Doesn't it bother you, not knowing what's really happening?" Richards shrugged. "I know enough. I know the rules keep me alive. I know this job pays better than anything I can get on shore, and I know that trying to understand everything will drive you crazy. So you just accept it? I survive it. There's a difference." By my 5th month, I understood what Richards meant. The rules had become automatic. I carried my flashlight without thinking about it. I finished all outdoor work before sunset without checking the time. I froze completely during the 2:13 blackouts, not even breathing hard anymore when the whispers started. But I still watched, still tried to understand the patterns. The sleepwalkers always moved in straight lines, never deviating from their paths. The black clouds always approached from the north and departed to the south. The fog always brought voices of people who mattered to whoever was listening. And the things in the water, I caught glimpses of them sometimes, even though I'd learned not to look directly. They circled the platform every night, always the same number, always the same pattern. Everything had a schedule. Everything had rules. Jose and I started eating lunch together regularly. He'd worked on offshore rigs for 15 years before coming to Deepwater Titan, and he had theories about what made this location different. "It's not just what's down there," he said one afternoon. "It's how deep we drilled. Most rigs stop at 10 or 12,000 feet. We went down to 15,000 before we hit what we were looking for. And that extra depth matters? Maybe. Or maybe it's the combination of depth and location. We're sitting over the deepest part of the Gulf. If something was going to be disturbed by drilling, this would be the place." "You think it's intentional? The company choosing this spot?" Jose considered that. "Hard to say. The oil deposits here are massive, worth billions, but the operational costs are higher than any comparable rig. The crew turnover, the equipment failures, the insurance claims. It would be cheaper to drill somewhere else. So why don't they? Because they can't get oil like this anywhere else. Whatever we're sitting on top of, it's producing more crude than should be geologically possible." During my 6th month, I experienced something that made all the previous encounters seem manageable. It was a Tuesday night in November. I was working a late shift, checking pressure readings on the lower deck pumps. The work was routine, just recording numbers and looking for anything unusual. I'd done the same checks dozens of times. But this time, everything went wrong at once. I was finishing the last pump when I noticed the sky changing. Black clouds were forming on the northern horizon, moving faster than I'd ever seen them. At the same time, fog was rolling in from the east, thick white walls of it approaching the platform. I dropped my clipboard and started running for the nearest entrance. But as I reached the main deck, I saw Leo walking toward the platform edge with that same mechanical stride I'd seen before. He was sleepwalking, but it was only 10:30. The sleepwalkers never appeared before midnight. I stopped, not sure which rule to follow. Get inside before the black clouds arrived, or stay still when encountering a sleepwalker. That's when the lights went out. Complete darkness, absolute silence. But it wasn't 2:13. My watch showed 10:34. The blackout had never happened this early. I stood frozen on the main deck, following the rule about staying motionless during power outages. But the black clouds were still approaching, and the fog was getting thicker. I could hear Leo's footsteps continuing toward the platform edge, steady and mechanical. Then the whispers started, not from the hallways like during normal blackouts, but from all around me. Multiple voices speaking in that same guttural language, but louder than I'd ever heard them. They seemed to be coming from the fog itself, from the approaching darkness, from the water below. I stayed perfectly still. That was the rule. No matter what happened during a blackout, don't move. But Leo was still walking. I could hear his footsteps getting closer to the edge. In 30 seconds, he was going to walk right off the platform. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. They seemed to be responding to each other, having conversations in that incomprehensible language. Some voices sounded angry, others pleased. All of them felt ancient, inhuman. Leo's footsteps stopped. He was at the edge. I wanted to call out, to warn him, to tackle him before he stepped off. But the rule was absolute. Stay still during blackouts. People who moved disappeared. The fog reached the platform, swirling around me in thick tendrils. I couldn't see anything beyond a few inches. The whispers were coming from inside the fog now, surrounding me. Some of them so close they seemed to be right next to my ear. Something brushed against my shoulder. Then my arm, cold fingers, just like during my first blackout, but this time there were more of them, touching my face, my back, my hands. I could feel them examining me, testing me. One of the voices spoke in English. "You're learning," it said. The voice was neutral, neither male nor female, with an accent I couldn't place. "You follow the rules." I didn't respond, didn't move, barely breathed. "Others don't learn," the voice continued. "They fight, they question, they break what shouldn't be broken." More cold touches, more whispers in the strange language. "You're useful," the English voice said. "You can stay." The fog grew thicker, the whispers grew louder. I could feel movement all around me, shapes passing just beyond my vision, things that weren't human, weren't natural. And through it all, I stayed perfectly still. The darkness lasted longer than 90 seconds, much longer. I lost track of time, focusing only on remaining motionless while supernatural forces swirled around me. The whispers continued, sometimes in the unknown language, sometimes in English. They talked about the deep places, about things that had been sleeping, about rules that kept the surface world separate from what lay beneath. When the lights finally came back on, it was 6:15 a.m. I'd been standing motionless on the deck for nearly 8 hours. The fog was gone. The black clouds had passed, and Leo was sitting on a bench near the platform edge, looking confused and tired but alive. "Mason?" he called when he saw me. "What are you doing out here? Did you work all night?" I looked down at myself. I was still holding my flashlight, still wearing my work clothes from the previous evening. My legs were shaking from standing in one position for so long. "Yeah," I said. "Long night." Leo stood up and stretched. "I must have sleepwalked again. I woke up out here a few minutes ago. Good thing I didn't fall off the edge." I watched him walk toward the galley for breakfast, moving normally, talking normally. Whatever had happened during those 8 hours, he didn't remember any of it. But I remembered everything. The voices, the touches, the conversation in English, the sense that I'd been evaluated and found acceptable. I'd survived the convergence, all the phenomena happening at once, breaking their normal patterns and schedules, and somehow, by following every rule simultaneously, I'd made it through. I couldn't shake what had happened during those 8 hours. Standing there in the dark with everything hitting at once, the fog, the clouds, the power out, Leo walking toward the edge. It changed something in how I saw this place. The rules weren't just some list Shane made up to scare new guys. They were a system. Somebody had figured out how to survive whatever lived down there in the deep water, and they'd written it down so the rest of us didn't have to die learning it the hard way. I started paying attention to things differently after that night. The way Jose checked his watch before heading outside, how Richards always kept his flashlight in the same pocket, the careful way Wesley scheduled work shifts so nobody got caught alone after dark. These weren't random habits. Every single thing the long-term crew did had a reason behind it. "You're thinking too much again," Shane said one morning, watching me stare out at the water during breakfast. "Maybe, but I get it now. Why you guys do things the way you do." He nodded. "Took you 6 months. That's about average for the ones who make it. How many don't make it? Half leave in the first month. Of the ones who stay, maybe half of those last 6 months. You do the math." I did the math. Out of every 10 new guys, maybe 2 or 3 stuck around long enough to really understand what this place was. "Why do you stay?" I asked. Shane finished his coffee and set the cup down. "Same reason you will. Money's good, but that's not really it. It's something else." "What?" "You figure that out on your own." The weeks kept rolling by. December brought rougher seas and shorter days, which meant more time inside during the dangerous hours. I'd been on the platform 8 months when Wesley called me into his office. "Your contract's up in 4 months, he said, looking at paperwork on his desk. "You thinking about renewal?" I hadn't really thought about it. The year had gone by faster than I expected. What's the renewal look like? Same terms, same pay, same everything. He looked up at me. You've done good work, Mason. No complaints from anybody. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. Good spots fill up fast. Walking back to my room, I realized Wesley was right about the good spots. Not many people could handle this job. It wasn't just the work. Plenty of guys could turn wrenches and fix pumps. It was everything else. The rules, the watching, the constant awareness that something was wrong with this place and you had to live with it anyway. 2 weeks later, a helicopter brought 3 new crew members. Wesley asked me to help with orientation. Mason here's been with us 8 months, Wesley told the new guys as we stood in the galley. He'll show you around, help you get settled. The 3 men looked like every other new arrival I'd seen. Eager, confident, ready to work hard and make good money. They had no idea what they'd signed up for. I took them through the same tour Wesley had given me. Drill floor, control room, safety stations, living quarters, basic stuff. Work schedules, meal times, shift rotations. Any questions so far? I asked when we finished. When do we start? Asked the tall one. Miller, I think his name was. Tomorrow morning, 6 sharp, but first there's some other things you need to know. I led them to an empty table in the rec area and sat down. They looked at me expectantly. This platform has some special rules, I started. Rules that aren't in your contract or the safety manual, but they're the most important rules you'll ever learn. Miller laughed. What kind of rules? I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my pocket, the same paper Shane had given me, though I'd made copies now. The original was too worn to keep passing around. 7 rules, I said. Follow them exactly, no exceptions, and you'll be fine. Break them, and bad things happen. The shortest guy, Davis, leaned forward. What kind of bad things? The kind where you disappear, or worse. I read them the rules, same as Shane had read them to me. Never look at the water after sunset. Always carry a flashlight between midnight and 6 a.m. Stay completely still during power outages. Ignore people walking at night who don't respond. Get inside when black clouds form. Return to your cabin if fog rolls in. Never enter the ocean. When I finished, all 3 were staring at me. You're serious, Miller said. Dead serious. That's insane, Davis said. What's this really about? Some kind of hazing thing? It's about staying alive. I told them about Braden, about Torres, about the things I'd seen during my first weeks on the platform. I kept it simple, just the facts. What happened when people didn't follow the rules? Davis shook his head. This is crazy. You expect us to believe there's monsters in the water? I expect you to follow the rules. Believe whatever you want, but follow the rules. The third guy, Kowalski, hadn't said much. He was looking at the paper like he was trying to memorize it. How many people have these rules saved, he asked. Everyone who's followed them, everyone who's ignored them has either left or gotten hurt. And management knows about this? Management follows the rules too. We talked for another hour. Davis kept arguing, calling it psychological manipulation and corporate control tactics. Miller seemed torn between skepticism and worry. Kowalski asked practical questions about timing and procedures. By the end of the conversation, I could see who was going to make it and who wasn't. Same way Shane probably knew about me after our first talk. Take the paper, I told them. Read it every day until you have it memorized. Ask questions if you need to, but follow every rule every time. Davis left the paper on the table when they went to unpack. Miller took it but kept shaking his head. Kowalski folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. I gave Davis 2 weeks, Miller maybe a month. Kowalski had a chance. Over the next few days, I watched them settle in. Davis made jokes about the ghost stories and ignored most of the rules. Miller tried to follow them but kept asking why and looking for logical explanations. Kowalski just did what he was told. On their 4th night, The power went out at 2:13 a.m. I was lying in my bunk when it happened, same as always. Complete darkness, complete silence. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway, heavy boots, moving fast. Davis. The whispers started a few seconds later, same guttural language I'd heard dozens of times. But tonight they sounded different, angry, like they'd found what they were looking for. I heard a door slam, then nothing. When the lights came back on at 2:15, I lay there listening. No more footsteps, no voices, just the normal platform sounds. In the morning, Davis was gone. His bunk was empty, his locker cleaned out. Wesley said he'd requested an emergency transfer and left on the supply helicopter at dawn. Miller looked shaken. He was fine yesterday. What happened? He didn't follow the rules, I said. But what actually happened to him? He learned why the rules exist. Miller lasted 3 more weeks before he put in for transfer, said the job wasn't what he expected. Kowalski stayed. By my 10th month, I was training new arrivals regularly. Wesley started calling me his orientation specialist. I got good at reading people, figuring out who had the right mindset and who didn't. The ones who made it all had something in common. They could accept that some things didn't need to be understood, just respected. They could follow instructions without needing to know why. They could live with mystery. The ones who didn't make it always wanted explanations. They needed everything to make sense according to rules they already knew. When reality didn't match their expectations, they either ran or broke. "You're getting good at this," Jose told me one afternoon. We were watching another batch of new guys get their first look at the rules. Shane was good at it too. Guess I learned from him. "Shane's been doing this for 20 years. You picked it up in less than one. Maybe I'm just good at following directions." Jose laughed. "Maybe. Or maybe this place finds the right people." I thought about that. The platform did seem to sort people pretty efficiently. The ones who belonged here stayed. The ones who didn't left. "You think it's random?" I asked. "Who ends up here?" "Nothing about this place is random." My contract renewal came up in March. I signed it without hesitation. "Didn't even read the terms," Wesley noted, watching me sign. "Same as before, right?" "Same as before." "Then I don't need to read it." He smiled. "You're learning." By my first anniversary, I understood what Shane had meant about why people stayed. It wasn't just the money, though the money was good. It was the satisfaction of mastering something impossible. Most people went their whole lives never really being tested, never finding out what they were capable of when everything familiar got stripped away. On the platform, you found out fast. You either learned to live with fear and uncertainty, or you didn't. You either accepted that some things were bigger than your understanding, or you didn't. You either trusted the wisdom of people who'd survived before you, or you didn't. I'd learned to do all those things. It made me different from who I'd been when I first stepped off that helicopter. "You'll go back," Shane had said during one of our last conversations before his transfer. "Once you figure out how to live with the impossible, regular jobs feel too easy." He was right. I'd tried to imagine going back to normal work, normal problems, normal rules that made sense. It felt like going backward. The platform had taught me something valuable about limits, about accepting that I didn't need to understand everything to live with it, about following proven guidelines even when they seemed crazy. Most people spent their lives fighting against limits, trying to control things beyond their control. Here, I'd learned the power of working within constraints that couldn't be changed. It was a strange kind of freedom. Once you accepted that some rules couldn't be broken, you stopped wasting energy trying to break them. You found other ways to move forward. The work continued. New crews arrived every few months. I trained them, watched some stay and others leave, passed on the same rules Shane had given me. Each time I read those 7 rules to scared new workers, I remembered my first night in room 23, how impossible it had all seemed, how sure I'd been that Shane was either crazy or lying. Now I knew better. The rules weren't about fear or control, they were about respect. Respect for things older and more powerful than human understanding. Respect for the knowledge earned by people who'd learned to survive in impossible places. I'd found my purpose in that respect, in the careful attention required to live safely alongside mystery, in the responsibility of keeping other people alive by teaching them what I'd learned. The platform demanded a specific kind of person, and I'd become that person. Someone who could accept the inexplicable and follow instructions without question. Someone who understood that the most important wisdom sometimes came not from figuring things out, but from learning to live alongside them. The terror was still there, the constant vigilance, the knowledge that one mistake could be the last mistake. But I'd made peace with all of it. This was where I belonged now. This was the work I was meant to do. I spent my last morning on the platform checking valves one final time. Wesley had given me light duties for the final week, nothing that couldn't be handed off easily. My replacement would arrive on the same helicopter that took me back to shore. The work felt different, knowing I was leaving. Every routine task carried weight now. I'd done these same pressure readings hundreds of times, but today I paid attention to the small details. The way the gauge needles settled, the sound of compressed air moving through the lines, the salt taste in the air. Jose found me around 10 a.m. near the drill floor. "Last day," he said. "Yeah." "You coming back?" I looked out at the horizon, keeping my eyes well above the waterline. "I think so," Jose nodded. "Most people who make it this far do. It gets in your blood. The money's good. It's not about money." Jose adjusted his tool belt. "You know that by now." I did know that. The money was just the excuse we told ourselves and our families. The real reason was harder to explain. How do you tell someone you've learned to live with impossible things, that you've found purpose in following rules that keep you alive in ways that shouldn't matter? "Shane's been looking for you," Jose said. "He's in the rec room." I finished the valve check and headed inside. Shane sat at the corner table with a cup of coffee, the same spot where he'd explained the rules to me on my first day. Seemed like a lifetime ago. "Sit down," he said. I pulled out the plastic chair across from him. "Wesley says my replacement's coming in on the same bird." "New guy named Patterson. Worked offshore before, but not here." Shane sipped his coffee. "You going to do the orientation?" "Wesley asked me to." "Good. You've got the touch for it." I thought about the dozen or so new crew members I'd trained over the past months. Some had listened, others hadn't. The ones who listened were still here. The others had either transferred out or faced consequences. "I've been thinking about something," Shane said, "about why some people make it and others don't." "Yeah? It's not about being smart. Hell, some of the smartest guys I've known couldn't handle this place. It's not about being tough either. I've seen tough guys crack in a week." Shane set down his cup and looked at me directly. "It's about accepting that the world's bigger than what you think you know. Most people can't do that. They need everything to make sense according to their rules. And the ones who can? They learn to live with mystery. They follow the rules because the rules work, not because they understand why." I pulled the folded paper from my pocket, the same one Shane had given me months ago. The edges were worn soft from handling, and some of the ink had faded, but every word was still clear. I'd memorized them all, but I still carried the paper everywhere. "Keep that," Shane said, noticing what I held. "Even when you're on shore, especially then." "Why?" "Because once you've lived by those rules, regular life feels thin, like you're missing something important. That paper reminds you what you learned here." The morning passed quietly. I finished my final equipment checks and filed my last maintenance reports. Wesley found me around noon to handle the paperwork for my departure. "Your replacement should be here by 3, he said, sliding forms across his desk. "Sign here and here." I signed without reading the details. After a year on the platform, I trusted Wesley's judgment completely. You did good work, Mason. Clean safety record, reliable, good with the new crew training. We'd be happy to have you back. Thanks. Wesley leaned back in his chair. You understand this place now. That's not something everyone can say. I understand enough. That's all anyone can understand. The people who try to figure out more than that, he shrugged. They don't last. After lunch, I packed my duffel bag. My belongings had expanded during the year. More work clothes, a few books, some personal items I'd accumulated, but everything still fit in the same bag I'd arrived with. Shane watched me fold my shirts into neat squares. You nervous about going back? A little. It's different on shore. People don't follow rules the same way. They think they can bend things, negotiate with reality. I zipped up the bag and set it by the door. I'll readjust. You will, but you'll be different now. Your family will notice. Shane was right about that. I'd changed in ways that would be hard to explain. I followed routines more carefully now. I paid attention to details other people missed. I'd learned to accept constraints instead of fighting them. The helicopter's coming, Shane said, hearing the distant sound of rotors. We walked outside together. The afternoon sun was bright, but I could see it starting its descent toward the horizon. In a few hours, the rules would kick in again. No looking at the water after sunset. Stay inside during power outages. Carry a flashlight between midnight and 6 a.m. The helicopter approached from the southeast, growing larger against the blue sky. I could see the pilot in the cockpit and a passenger in the cabin. Patterson, probably. Another new arrival who'd need to learn what this place demanded. The helicopter circled once before settling onto the landing pad. The rotors stayed spinning, ready for a quick departure. A man in clean work clothes climbed out, carrying a duffel bag identical to the one I'd brought a year ago. He looked around with the same mixture of curiosity and nervousness I remembered feeling. Wesley appeared to greet the new arrival. I watched them shake hands and begin walking toward the main building. Patterson would get the standard tour first. Then the real education would begin. That's your cue, Shane said. We walked toward the helicopter together. The pilot gave me a thumbs up and pointed to his watch. He wanted to leave soon to make sure before dark. I turned to face Shane. After a year of sharing a room, working the same shifts, and surviving the same impossible nights, he'd become more than a mentor. He was the closest friend I'd made in years. Thanks, I said, for everything. Shane nodded. You earned it. Most people don't make it past the first month. You made it through a full rotation. He extended his hand and I shook it. His grip was firm, calloused from 20 years of offshore work. You'll be back, he said with certainty. How do you know? Because this place gets in your blood. Because you've learned something here you can't learn anywhere else. Shane stepped back as I picked up my duffel bag. Take care of yourself on shore. Remember what you learned. I walked toward the helicopter, feeling the weight of the folded paper in my pocket, the rules that had kept me alive for a year, the knowledge that some places in the world operated by different laws, and survival meant accepting that reality instead of fighting it. The pilot helped me into the cabin and I strapped myself in. Through the window, I could see Shane walking back toward the main building. Wesley was already giving Patterson the tour, pointing out the drill floor and safety stations. The helicopter lifted off smoothly, rising above the platform. I looked down at Deepwater Titan one final time, seeing it from the same angle I'd first glimpsed it a year ago. But now I understood what I was looking at. Not just an oil rig, but a place where impossible things happened every night, where people learned to follow rules that defied explanation because those rules kept them alive. The platform grew smaller as we gained altitude, but I kept watching until it disappeared into the blue expanse of the Gulf. I knew I'd be back. Shane was right about that. This place had changed me in ways I was still discovering. I'd learned to master survival in an environment where the impossible was just another work hazard to be managed through discipline and respect for hard-won wisdom. That knowledge would stay with me always, no matter how far from the platform I traveled. The helicopter turned toward shore, carrying me back to a world that would feel different now, but I was ready for that difference, and I was proud of what I'd accomplished.